Welcome back to track 3, where we have a great panel lined up for you on DAM in the digital media supply chain. If you're looking for implementing a strong DAM system from scratch, head back to the agenda tab and click track 1. Or for the rise of AI in the DAM space, click track 2. Now that phrase, digital media supply chain, sounds awfully grand, but it's really just that DAM is part of something bigger. Your assets are coming from somewhere, perhaps more importantly, they're going somewhere to be used. That's the life cycle of your content, the workflows and the processes that DAM is a key part of. That's your content supply chain. So what we're going to explore here in this session is what it means to think about your DAM as part of something larger. And we have 3 great experts to share their perspectives. Chelsea D'Angelo, Senior Program Manager at Brandfolder, Mike McGuinness, Vice President of Product Technology at Southern New Hampshire University, and Perry Solomon, General Manager of Brands at Woodwing. Now, as we get going here, please start sending us your questions through the Q&A box. Maybe to start, we'll have each of the panel do a quick intro about yourselves and maybe talk a little bit about where you see DAM sitting in the media life cycle for you. Chelsea, why don't we start with you?
Sure, happy to be here. I'm a Senior Program Manager at Brandfolder. My career so far before Brandfolder had been in creative agencies and working with really Fortune 50, 500 companies, I should say, Fortune 100. So ExxonMobil, Target, Levi Strauss, Avon, Home Depot, and really getting their content production teams in place. We did a lot of content marketing, a lot of digital marketing. So then when I found Brandfolder, it really was an obvious click to me on why people would need technology like this. We've struggled for a long time with figuring out what assets are available and how to get the production process as streamlined and as efficient as possible. So this was a no-brainer for me. So now I work in the marketing department, actually, working on leading the creative and content team for a platform that I think really helps content creators. And I think DAM in general is more than just a platform for creators. I think on a bigger scale, it really adds up to facilitating the whole marketing stack, the whole tech stack, I should say. So it's about looking at, as leaders of an organization, figuring out what is going to make my employees work better, work smarter, and collaborate more efficiently. And for me, DAM is just a really key part of perhaps the whole picture of a tech stack for any organization.
Very nice. That's a very nice tee up, I think, for what we're about here today. Mike, how about your world?
Thanks, Graham. Very similarly to what Chelsea was saying, I'm finding folks much more interested in partnering and collaborating because folks are realizing that you can't achieve both scale and speed if we don't continue to knock down the silos. And so I recently joined Southern New Hampshire University, where I work very closely with the product technology team, and their job is to innovate and drive new learning products and services to our students. And I'm in the IT organization, and my job is to provide them a path to scale, but also not have them rebuild things that are already sort of been built and tested, and essentially to help enable the development of new products and services. And what they're quickly realizing is one of the challenges that we will face is understanding the entire digital supply chain, from rights acquisition for content, any content, augmentation, aggregation, deaggregation, reaggregation, all the way through to delivery, and then some kind of feedback to make sure that there's a loop back saying, yeah, we understand what we had and we understand what we did with it, and that's working. And that was a very consistent challenge that we were also facing when I was previously at AMC Networks. It's amazing how in 2 somewhat different industries, it's all about getting content and putting it in front of eyeballs and making it meaningful and useful and a seamless experience. So I think that's kind of been an evolution that's been occurring in the DAM space over the last 20 some odd years.
I think, you make an interesting observation there about the diversity of content types that we speak of now. And perhaps it's something we can come back and explore a little bit more later. And then Perry, tell us a little bit about your world.
Yeah, no, thank you, Graham, and Chelsea and Mike. It's nice to be on the panel and to learn from you today. At Woodwing, we like to say that we provide technology to help brands, publishers, and agencies tell their stories. And I think we're all one way or another, charged with being storytellers in the roles that we play, whether it's stories about the capabilities that we can offer to companies looking for or implementing a DAM, or importantly, for users of DAM, to be able to tell stories that engage with audiences and deliver meaning and help drive business outcomes. I think if anything we've learned over the last year plus, as workforces have moved remote, sort of as the gig economy has continued to grow, both how teams come together to tell stories, and importantly, where recipients of those stories, where our audiences are, and how they want to engage with those stories has changed dramatically. Consumer behavior has gone through radical change. How teams work has gone through radical change. And I think what we're seeing and what we've always believed is that digital asset management was a key part of that. But we've seen really how much more so, how as teams are no longer physically together, and as consumers are consuming in different ways in different places with different models, that their expectations have really increased. And that's where we work with companies, and we really see digital asset management as enabling not just the diversity of content types, which is spot on, but also just helping storytellers deal with the increase in the volume of outputs, just the demands to be in so many channels, the demands to be so fast in the iterations, that having this foundational sort of heartbeat of a digital asset management is really critical. So look forward to sharing our experiences and learning from the group today.
So that storytelling theme is perhaps an interesting place to start, because I think each of you maybe represent a little bit different angle on storytelling, but you're still all storytelling. So Perry, can you double click a little bit into how you would encourage your audience to think of what to look for in a DAM, what sort of capabilities matter in a DAM for the kinds of storytelling they need, and maybe how to evaluate the other way around, what kinds of storytelling do they need that they would then map to DAM?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. So we recently put together a piece with one of our content partners around the new rules of multi-channel marketing. I think probably the new rules get written every year, but it's just a function and a reflection of the fact that marketing and demands from consumers, both businesses and end consumers, are changing so significantly. And I'll use sort of that framing to get to your question about sort of capabilities. Because I think it holds together. The first is sort of know what you have. I think that some of this is also, as people come into new roles, there's also sort of this ramp up of how do I find out what we have and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and what we have access to and what we can use, and who our content partners are and where we get that from, and how we use user generated content. So there's sort of this big question about how do we know what we have, and that really kind of gets at that sort of core DAM capability around ingestion and metadata management and metadata enrichment, so that you really can think of digital asset management as that single source of the truth and that repository for knowing what you have and what you can use. So the marketers can then go and create the things that they want without having to worry about, am I going to get in trouble for that? Are we going to get sued for that? Or am I going to get something pulled back because we used something we weren't supposed to use? Second rule, in a sense, is implement workflows that deliver value and allow creatives to be creative. So how do we get the process out of the way and allow people to be actionable in how they think about connecting their message to that audience member? And I think across the board, that's been a big area of investment for all digital asset management solutions providers, is to make it easier for sort of the process to be to just sort of go down underneath, and to allow people to have content to be recommended that will be effective and can be used and will be surfaced in a way that marketers and publishers can go deliver those stories most efficiently and collaboratively, and even more so in distributed environments. And then the third is sort of maximize distribution for impact, and that's sort of the audience feedback loop. And so I think that's sort of a place where DAM is transforming from being sort of to some extent a repository to much more of a proactive enabler of being able to find the right places for distribution. So that the more that you know about the audience member, the more that you know about the goal that they have in consuming that content, and then being able to feed back that knowledge into how content gets created and distributed out into the marketplace.
I think feedback loop and the notion of collaboration are two things we might come back and drill into later. Those are rather tasty. So the capability areas. Chelsea, how do you find yourself? What do you find yourself coaching people around and thinking about the DAM capabilities that matter for the bigger picture and for their storytelling?
I'd say it's variable based on industry, based on company. I think there's a kind of nuanced set of challenges for everyone that is creating any type of content. I think the important piece is, at least my experience was always like this damn sat obviously as a repository at the end, but it also really came at the beginning and understanding what I needed, where I needed, what the gaps were, what I needed to understand in order to start creating, even to create a brief for something, like what was available to us. And I think from a kind of creative perspective, it's about thinking, what do I want, who's going to own this, and how are we going to kind of develop a structure that's going to hold steady. And then I think importantly, adoption. So in order to get anyone to actually, be successful in using their DAM, it's about how easily the DAM interface and the features are to use naturally. I think change is hard for everyone. I mean, this last year and a half, we all went through it. We were forced to, but I think a lot of change came from that because we were forced to do it, not because, I was reading an article and they said, it was an HBR article that said that the change in the first few months of the pandemic was faster and more changes than most CEOs had dealt with in the past decade. Mm-hmm. So I think change is tough. So I think in terms of usability and then adoption and understanding how your organization, what challenges specific to your structure and culture are going to come up against. So is it going to be, are you going to need approvals? Are you going to have the leadership who's going to be able to go into the DAM and approve things, versioning, how many other pieces of your kind of tech stack include versioning. So if you have versioning going on in one area, but then versioning going on in another area, you're going to run into issues. So I think there's so many different factors. And I think that's what's really nice is when you find the right kind of solution or the right vendor, we at Brandfolder will coach you kind of through that process in terms of like, what are the things that every scenario is very specific to the company and the industry and the people and the team that you're working with. So I think there's a lot to go into in terms of your team culture, the leadership that's involved and what needs to be involved, as well as kind of the technological integrations and usability that is going to work best for your team.
Adoption, there's a KPI, right, for DAM. And I think, many DAM projects think of adoption for, their direct users, the notion of people logging into the DAM tool for core DAM functions. But as you think of DAM as part of something larger, how would you coach your customers to think of adoption beyond the core DAM group? Because that's likely just as important, maybe even more important for some of the asset types. What have you found works?
So typically you need from the outset to have those owners, and those owners need to be champions, and they need to kind of be bulldogs about it, and really go after others and say, this is how it needs to be done. Every time you upload something, you need to take X, Y, and Z step, or have the opposite approach where it's like, okay, I'm going to own this and you need to tell me when something's uploaded and I need to go through X, Y, the governance aspect of it needs to be established from the outset, whether it's someone who's going to say, okay, I own this piece, and you own that piece, or it's you're putting the onus on individuals. But I think making that clear from the outset is the most important part. And again, that varies, company to company and even company culture from company culture within specific teams, and even within one company, within team to team. But I'd say usually having one champion that's going to say, okay, I'm going to own this and I'm going to make sure that this is what's done right. Those are oftentimes the ones that work the best, is having someone who is a complete owner, and whether they delegate X, Y, or Z, they have the accountability to make sure that everything is seen, it kind of goes through and the buck stops with them essentially.
Well, Mike, you actually, you talked about a couple of different spaces, an education space and a media space. Can you talk a little bit about that notion of sort of change management psychology, where it's not just the person that's the the catalog or the librarian putting the assets into DAM. It's people much further downstream, or maybe even people upstream, contributing. What does it mean to think through, the psychology of adoption?
I actually think there's more similarities than differences across the several different industries I've worked in, and I think that my observation is there's a couple of reasons. I'm consistently surprised that a lot of people don't understand what the concept of a digital supply chain is, but they totally get what a physical supply chain is. And there are so many analogies between them. And I think the revelation for me is that physical supply chains were hard to manage because they were physical, and you had to pick something up and move it from here to there, and you had to do it efficiently and in a cost-effective way. And even in a siloed world where that person picked it up and put it down there, and then that person picked it up and put it down there, it got very efficient. And there were a lot of supply chain breakthroughs in the 20th century. Then digital content comes along. It's incredibly easy to create digital content. It's incredibly easy to distribute digital content. It's incredibly hard to do it consistently and cost effectively at scale. And I think that's where organizations stumble, and within a rights position, because your content not only can be made visible, but can be found out to be visible, not within its rights position. And so we have this content explosion where content is very easy to get out there, very easy to create. There's an explosion of user-generated content that could include your content. And I think that trying to drive home the idea that as organizations get more and more complex and larger and have to scale, and as silos start to break down, the whole collaboration angle that Chelsea spoke of, now you're dealing with a change element that is not within a space, it's across spaces, and it can be iterative, it could be evolving, and not everyone understands what their role is in that. And so giving them some context on the position they are in within the bigger part of getting content in and getting content out is hard, but not as hard as we sometimes make it. Sometimes we're constrained by our old thinking, we're constrained by the silos, and we take our eye off the prize and say the goal isn't for you to create a logo. The goal is for there to be a logo that fits within a brand that sits on some sort of asset or offering or flyer or poster or website or this or that. And although I think people get that, if they're in the piecework business, or if they only see a piece of it and aren't made to understand the bigger whole that they contribute to, and I think people crave being a part of that bigger whole. It makes their job more interesting. And so if you can appeal to the value that's being created collectively and get people to lean into it, and there's a great quote from The Little Prince. It says, if you want people to build a ship, don't give them wood and nails and tools, make them long for the sea. And so if we can get people to really feel like they're a part of the mission and a part of the vision and a part of the product or a part of the marketing output or whatever it is that's using the assets, then they're going to lean into that, and change management is going to be easier to manage, not easy, but easier to manage, because the people part is the hard part, not the technology.
Very, very true. You mentioned collaboration. Okay, Perry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, forgive me. I think we all hate this about Zoom. Is sometimes it's hard to get excited and follow up on something. But both Chelsea and then Mike both sort of talked about sort of the human dynamic of adoption, and I think we've all seen it. We've all been part of projects where somebody who maybe isn't organizationally the one that's supposed to influence others, either seniority or role, or wasn't part of the project plan to do the training or the teaching. But he or she is so excited about how this new thing can make their lives that much easier, that they volunteer to do it. Sort of the expression of find the helpers. Find the person who is so sort of jazzed, geeked out about the fact that they can now do something in 3 steps that took them 30, or that they don't have to do anything at all because it just sort of magically appears for them. And I forgot to make sure that we renewed that license. It's okay. We already got the new version of that photo or that image that automatically came in from our stock photo provider. And I think that those are the people who often turn out to be the ones who are most influential in driving adoption. The ones who want to sort of sit next to their buddy and say, hey, let me spend lunchtime with you, showing you why I'm so jazzed about this. And maybe even viewing this as an opportunity to be a bit of a star in the organization, to bring something new and to be the sort of that influencer. And I think it's a very nice thing when it happens. We've all been part of it. And it's something that in my experience certainly can make a dam project feel a lot more fun for people who are involved with it.
Well said. So, you know, there's a bit interesting related question has come in from the audience. How do you folks recommend thinking about extending that psychology of change beyond your own walls into external parties like agencies that may be supplying content, or maybe consumers of content outside your walls, where perhaps the dynamics are different, the forces at play are a little bit different, the notion of control and management is a little bit different. Perry, we'll stay with you.
I think, you know, the word that came to mind as I was listening to your question, or the question from the audience member, was easy, which is that if you make it easier for your partner to engage with you, to work with you, to see the benefit and the value of the work that they do, then it creates a pattern. I think we've all probably seen that graphic meme of the sidewalk with the right angle and then the path across the grass, that people kind of follow the thing that is user behavior, the path of least resistance. And so, I think these projects work outside the organization when something that has found a home and has made work easier and allowed people to be more collaborative and share and feel more empowered is easily transferred to a partner or to another organization. We see it a lot in the work that we do with brands that have agency partners, where sort of, whether it's syncing, sort of the project management tool in the DAM in a way that allows them to kind of all be literally on the same page, or I guess now with software virtually on the same page, but allows them to really feel that they are working together more collaboratively, and they don't have to think about what tools to be put together to do it. We're just in sync. And I think those are the cases where it just works well, when it can be seamless, and just makes everybody's life a little bit easier.
That's fair. Maybe all of you at some point mentioned collaboration here. Perry, you touched on it there. Mike, maybe back with you. I think you were the first to mention it. How can DAM support collaboration, and what would you look for in a DAM technology or tool set to enable collaboration that's not just about the DAM function itself, where you're part of that larger content supply chain?
Yeah, I actually think DAM practitioners are somewhat uniquely positioned because they can see the entire supply chain if they look. In other words, if you don't stay inside the DAM box and you look up to rights and actually engage with folks that are acquiring content to understand why are they acquiring this content, to what end, or to what end do they think they're acquiring this content, what drives the differences in the way content is acquired to that end? Why do you purchase this type of content over that type of content? So get smarter about what folks are bringing in on the input side, but as importantly, if not more importantly, why is it being consumed, or is it being consumed? I think there's a fair amount of content that is acquired and or created that doesn't end up being exploited either the way it was intended or at all. So, and what's interesting about that is you might actually start to find some efficiencies and some ROI on aligning your content outcomes with the content aspirations and inputs. And when you find money, you build credibility. But more importantly, you'll start a dialogue across that continuum. Because right now, the folks that are down at the exploitation end might be so far removed, and sometimes they aren't. They're creating the demand, but sometimes they're so far removed from the intention of what was going to be done when it was originally acquired that there's friction created in getting it to them, and it turns out that there's inefficiencies there. I also think you, as DAM practitioners, look beyond just your internal supply chain and look to the market, because dynamics change and there are different reasons for using different types of content. Get to understand that from the perspective of the people whose responsibility that is. A marketing person needs to know, why do I use video? Why do I use audio? Why do I use something that's visually vibrant, or this or that or the other thing? The more you understand that, the more you will understand what to do to make it more efficient within the supply chain, to give them the things they want, the way they want them. And so I think that there's a perspective there across silos. And then the second part of that would be recognizing those silos. Some folks just want that handoff. Well, it's not so much about a handoff. And I don't think this is specific to DAM. I think it's specific to anything that right now is being powered by digital and digital technologies and digital platforms, is folks still want to do their job. Well, sorry, your job is now tied into, and there's a ripple effect. And there's an analogy in the early part of my career. I did ERP before I did cool, sexy digital content. And what was amazing about it was the ERP systems forced the folks in the materials management group to work with the finance group, because when you did a materials movement, it affected inventory and it affected the costs on your books, and it was all integrated. You couldn't do something over here in an integrated system and process that didn't press on a button over here. And I think we're seeing that now with content at scale. You can still do a lot when you're not at scale. And so maybe there's a postscript there that don't stifle the innovation, don't hit a fly with a sledgehammer, don't overwhelm them with digital supply chain just for the purposes of digital supply chain. But if you want to achieve scale and be brutally efficient, you're going to need to start to knock those silos down and see across the whole continuum and sell the idea of a digital supply chain to get that collaboration going from front to back.
Perry, how much do you see that driven, enabled by the technology versus is this a process and people and change? I'm sure it's not like 100% one or the other, but how would you characterize that?
Yeah. No, I think technology when it's done right is seamless to the people that use it. And as Mike was sort of describing the physical supply chain in his earlier answer, I think we sort of, we all kind of got that because people were in different roles and different titles. And as you pointed out, Mike, often we're in different locations. But in the digital world, sort of all of that stuff kind of, it's gotten munged together. And so in some ways, it really is about people figuring out together, independent of the technology, how they want to work together. What's most effective for them, how they feel that they have that blend of flexibility but repeatability. And I think once people kind of sit down and understand kind of what's the right way for them to work together to achieve their goals, the technology is very easily implemented. We like every probably vendor in the space, has learned that we need to have really smart people who can listen as much as we have people who can come in and figure out how to write lines of code. I feel fortunate we have people that come from a lot of the worlds that the companies that we work with, and so in some ways maybe we can short circuit that. We can kind of understand how to translate the words that we're hearing into kind of what we think people might want to need and can put, make that work a little bit faster. But ultimately the technology is in service of people feeling that they can collaborate and that they can achieve their goals more efficiently. And I think that's really kind of table stakes now is that it's allowing people to implement those workflows that allow them to do their best work, and allow them to iterate in those workflows as they realize that over time they're going to need to do things in a different way. And that's really what we're all in the service of.
And maybe complementary to that, since Perry, you mentioned earlier the notion of data, feedback, information. So complementary to the people collaboration, the sort of the information flows, the system to system collaboration. What matters today in the kind of feedback that DAM could get from consumption downstream or asset usage downstream or any kind of activity downstream?
Yeah, I'll give my 2 cents, and then of course we'd love to hear the others. But I think content, the economics of content is so well understood now, and so optimizing for delivery, where it's paid delivery, optimizing that you're getting the performance you need, where it's owned, making sure that you're investing in building audience in those places where you want to be able to go back over time. And again, maybe just as a parenthetical, it also happens so fast. A year ago, email marketing was the be all and end all, and then Apple makes a change to how email notification happens on their phones, and suddenly now everyone says, well, maybe we're not going to have the visibility. We got to rethink what performance data is meaningful to us. So it's being nimble, it's being iterative, but having that feedback loop for owned, earned, and paid is really critical. And I think it's really the task that anybody in marketing or publishing is charged with today.
Chelsea, what are you seeing in that space of information coming back, feeding back into DAM?
I mean, I completely agree with what Perry's been saying. I'd say it's always been there to a degree, whether it's even back in the day in kind of traditional media. And then now in terms of digital, what you put out in campaigns, you see immediate feedback, especially on social, a lot of display. You're seeing that feedback. You see exactly what works, you change, you iterate all the time. Now for that to connect to DAM in terms of whether it's someone who's sharing, downloading, or you have, connected directly to your website and you see how many people are interacting on your website through a CDN. It's everywhere. And I think marketing doesn't exist without that feedback anymore. It's all dependent on the data. We're in this really wonderful space where kind of art meets science. And I think having that kind of scientific feedback to the art that you are able to put out. And again, in a collaborative manner, I love the fact that in a lot of instances, you can see how what someone else put out is doing, and you could learn from that. So I think in a lot of like kind of larger enterprise and what Mike was saying earlier in terms of scale, a lot of my past experience was dealing with very global companies and being able to connect what's working well in one market, what's working well, can pivot and work well in another market. That feedback is huge. And especially for, global affiliates that have smaller teams, that ability to lean on data that they can see happening in maybe somewhere else with larger budgets, they can just lean into that a little bit easier. It's huge. It's a game changer for a lot of smaller teams, even if they are part of a larger organization. And I'm sure obviously that continues for all organizations of all sizes.
Art meets science is a very astute observation here. The right brain and the left brain coming together. It's one of the defining features of DAM. How do you define success? How do you recommend our audience think of defining success when maybe it's not pure science?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of different factors to that. I think, and it depends on, success for the DAM could even come down differently to each different role of the person that's engaging, whether it's the creative who's all of a sudden not getting all of these crazy email requests and now is able to use the central source of truth. And for them, the reduction in interruptions and these constant, can you get this logo? Can you update this? What is this the latest version? Versus someone who's maybe in marketing leadership that's seeing their team able to deploy campaigns much faster, who's able to kind of QA. And so we needed to really update this one asset and everything is distributed in the CDN. So all of a sudden our distribution time just took no time because everything is feeding off one central source of truth. So whether it's time saved, whether it's a team's efficiency, whether it's just the reduction in extra tedious tasks, tedious requests, sometimes it is more anecdotal. I think obviously the straight science of being able to see whether an asset is being shared, downloaded, et cetera, beautiful. But I think and what comes back to that collaboration aspect, when you can see and feel a team all of a sudden work much more smoothly together. And I think when you're in it, you feel it. That is one thing that you just can't put your finger on sometimes, but it's a beautiful thing. And in the end, really saves everyone time and money.
Very nice. And Mike, what does success mean in your world?
I was going to, that's a hard thing to answer. And I think I was going to make an observation that over the last several years in 2 different tours of duty, I've seen folks struggle with defining that success. And I think part of the reason is uncertainty, meaning strategies are evolving and iterating very quickly. And so and then you need to connect strategy to tactics, and tactical teams need tactical certainty. And so they kind of need to know, what am I doing? And am I taking that hill? Okay, then that's my success factor, taking that hill. But if you get halfway up the hill and someone says, oops, not that hill, we're going to pivot and go this hill, it can upset folks. And I've heard this narrative coming out where, well, I don't understand our business strategy. And I often wonder do you don't understand it because you haven't leaned into it to understand it in a way where there is uncertainty. Your strategy isn't, we're going to do this come hell or high water, and it's going to work, and this is what it is, and this is going to come out the other end. I think the other part is at the strategic and leadership level. Sometimes because of the uncertainty, there isn't enough meat on the bones. There aren't clearly defined objectives and key results that folks can then piggyback on and build their strategy. Because as a DAM practitioner, your strategy supports a bigger strategy, or in any role that you're in the organization. And so what I would challenge folks to do is don't wait to be told. You can read between the lines. Most companies have a strategy, and most of them publish some portion of it or explain it to you. Fill in the uncertainty and create your own certainty. but then don't take a pass on creating your own objectives and key results. I mean, I'll be full, I'll put it out there that I hate going in and putting my goals into Workday, because if I don't think anyone's going to read it, but you know what, going through the action of creating goals and having something to measure what you're doing by the end of a period should be applied to whatever you're doing. And I know sometimes it's like, well, I'm not going to be rewarded for that. Well, maybe not, but you'll definitely be heading in a better direction than if you're not sure and you're just reacting. If you're more proactive, because I don't think it's as easy as saying, oh, success is defined by that. You could do that, especially if you have very clear objectives and key results and KPIs attached to them that are explained down to a level of detail. But if you don't, and there's more uncertainty in your strategy and what you're doing, then you're going to have to fill in the blanks. You're going to have to fill in the gray space and create a goal for you, for your team, for your department, for your division, whatever it is. I wouldn't wait for someone to hand it to you.
Well, so maybe follow on from that. What kinds of stakeholder do you recommend our DAM teams in our audience build relationships with or reach out to, around the organization to understand that, to understand strategy, understand their role in the bigger picture?
I'm going to jump in and say, I bet you the relationships are already there. It's changed the questions you're asking. I bet you're already interacting with the folks that you need to, because you're already trying to fulfill on a basic or an advanced service or whatever it is. But then you're just turning the crank. So they're dealing with the same uncertainty you're dealing with. So you have to stay closer to them and continually to challenge and ask better questions or different questions, because things are changing. If all you're asking is, did I meet yesterday's service level? And even if you're asking that, there's a lot of folks that aren't even asking that question. But if all you're asking about is what I did to turn the crank today, rather than, what do I need to turn the crank tomorrow, or do I need a new crank? I think there needs to be that higher order engagement to stretch beyond the boundaries or the constraints that you were either given or took on, and start to ask different questions. And I had a meeting with my team yesterday, and I said, we were in that meeting and you were very frustrated, but what questions did you ask to get over the hump? Did you expect them to just come in and tell you, like just have it on 2 tablets and hand it to you? And it was an eye opener, because they realized they missed an opportunity to ask better questions. And I think that's part of what we have to do to deal with uncertainty and deal with the need for speed and constant change. And it's hard, but I think it's fun. It's, I like questions and answers. It's a fun process.
Well, Chelsea, you were smiling there. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say that even lines up to what you were saying earlier about adoption, and it's about everyone understanding the larger context of what's going on. And that, as much as you as a player in terms of this new technology and how you can help make it work is one thing, but also how this whole system works towards everyone's strategy, the company's strategy. And therefore, within that, what are the KPIs? What are you trying to reach? I think that all lines up really nicely in terms of it really comes down to team communication and making sure that everyone's on the same page. And that lines up with adoption, it lines up with KPIs and everyone working towards that same success goal in the end.
Yeah, and maybe just to echo that and bring it back, Graham, to the question earlier about sort of success factors. This one maybe is a little bit harder to measure, although there's probably a metric for it. Is the company easy to do business with? And is somebody that you work with in that organization, are they reliable and credible in delivering the things that they're pledged to deliver? Business is just a web of relationships. There's so many choices we all make in who we work with and who we sell to, who we buy from, and so in some ways, we see DAM as enabling more productive, repeatable relationships. Consistency in the delivery of content. Fewer mistakes and mess ups. Ease of accessing important things at deadlines. I mean, these are sort of all these things that are inherently human. And companies that do these things well, and people within organizations sort of empowered by digital asset management to do these things well, often get the phone call more frequently. And I think ultimately that's something that's good for business. I used to work for a guy who talked about, when they want to do business with you, say yes. In some ways it's just learning how to be easy to do business with and being reliable and trustworthy. And that's really where success often is certainly is best evidenced.
How often does the phone ring for good reasons? There's a KPI. There's a success.
Right.
A success
right. To
factor
Chelsea's point
think about
less annoyance. Yeah, that's a great point.
We're actually, coming up on the end of our time here. Maybe one final question, around the horn here. Thinking about the future. So what, I don't know, evolutions or revolutions should our audience be thinking about, be ready for with DAM in a content workflow? And that might be tech, it might be process, it might be something else. Perry, we'll start with you. What should we be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I think, and maybe I sort of signaled it with a couple of my answers, but I do think that the role of someone who can really kind of drive that change within the organization around what the power and the potential of building this kind of digital content supply chain can be, and helping their peers and their direct reports and their seniors understand the power of digital asset management. I think that's our job is to help make champions within organizations, to reduce the friction, to reduce the headaches, and allow people to work more efficiently and collaboratively. And I think that's something where there's going to be greater recognition of that going forward. I think if we do our collective jobs of listening and being able to translate what we're hearing into good technology, then that will bear out and be effective. And it's what we spend a lot of time thinking about is how do we listen better? And ultimately that allows us to have more DAM practitioners who are successful leaders in their organizations.
Excellent thoughts. Mike, what's in your crystal ball?
I think folks are going to expect more of each other. I think they're going to expect us to be proactive and get out in front of their problems, because their expectations are increasing, if not exponentially, at a high rate of speed. And I think last week, someone called into one of the teams and asked about AI, and it was kind of an odd conversation because and the oddest part about it was when they got off the call, no one understood why they were talking about AI. Just the fact that someone was asking about it, and it was the good fortune that the person on the other end actually had a perspective. But again, opportunity to ask more questions and be proactive to understand, well, what's your interest in AI? But I think we have much more sophisticated users, much more sophisticated consumers. I think they see technology doing amazing and crazy things. So they expect more from not just technology, but they also expect the technology to work in the context of process and people interactions. And so the bar is getting higher. And I think being proactive and taking more of a leadership role, which was a theme from this morning at the keynote, that getting out in front of some of the opportunities and bringing solutions to problems in a proactive fashion, I think is going to increasingly be more important and ultimately table stakes for the folks that advance at a high enough rate of speed.
Yeah, very true. And then Chelsea, final word to you.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. If we believe in Moore's law, which I know is somewhat controversial, but if we believe in that, then I mean, the demand for digital is just going to increase. I think speed and volume, although it feels like it couldn't increase anymore, I think will in the end. And so I think it's about getting smarter. I think it will lead into more technology. So automation, AI, cloud, I mean, everything that we are using now, I think will continue to get better much faster. And therefore, I think embracing change outside of a pandemic that's forcing you to do it, I think is going to be the, catalyst that will actually push us into kind of new territories and new technology and new way of thinking and working for everyone.